Hi, and welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. You're listening to Get Uncomfortable. And what we mean in this program by get uncomfortable is just that. Not sitting so long at a conference table that you got to uncross your legs and cross them the other way before your butt falls asleep. Not that conversation that you have where you have those earbuds in your ears so long talking to an old friend that your ears start to hurt and they ring a little bit, but you haven't talked for so long, you're going to do whatever it takes to get through. That's the part that we care about. We're going to do whatever it takes to get through. And it's that whatever it takes, when we realize we have to bring it, when we realize we have to show up and do whatever it takes to get to our goal, we know we're uncomfortable. And Amy Charity is here to talk about being uncomfortable today with us. At the age of 34, she left the financial industry to pursue her passion and her career in professional bike racing. Yeah, you heard it, professional bike racing. Amy raced all over the world at the highest level of the sport. She's been a coach now for over a decade, and she brings what she's learned to her clients and her speaking engagements. I have to tell you, you'll get to meet Amy right after this. And I just want to say, we met in passing. We talked for a little bit, and I knew she would be great for the show because we both talk about uncomfortableness. You get to hear some of her story, and you get to hear great advice that we can apply at home, at work, in our hobbies, and in our overall personal development. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
You talk a lot about comfort zone. You talk a lot about stretching boundaries. You talk a lot about moving outside of what we think is possible. And what are the steps to even be able to begin thinking like that? Because I know there are some people, and I've been there, that I'm so afraid of the getting ready that I don't even get ready.
Yeah. And I think that that's really common, is that the hang up is with that very first step. I always say start small. And that is that it can be daunting. If you decide you want to do something, I often think of, let's say, run a 10K because it's something very tangible. So let's say you want to run a 10K. If you think in terms of, that's over 6 miles, that's daunting, right? Like if you think of walking out your door and going 6 miles, that's huge. But where I think people can start, go buy the right running shoes. Like that's your first step. The first steps can start tiny, or it is find a friend who wants to do this with you and meet up and do a walk where you run a little bit on a couple of days from then. I always found that if you start with these tiny little steps, it helps to push that along. And eventually you think, oh, now I'm running 3 miles and it's okay. Like this feels okay. Whereas a few weeks before that, that might have felt daunting to you then. And you keep going down that path until eventually you do get to the point where you can run that 6 miles. A 10K is the example, but I think that's true in a work setting or in trying something new or different, is if you just do that one thing that you know you can do and check that off your list right now, that's where most of us get hung up, in pushing outside of our limits of what we think is comfortable.
Then there's another group of us. I'm kind of in this group too. We jump in the pool with all of our clothes on and decide we're going to swim.
Right.
Uh-oh, what did we just do? This is a lot more effort than we thought.
Yeah, this water is really cold and really deep. What have I done?
Yeah, and how can I get my shoes off now? This would be really good.
Yeah. That's more unique, but that definitely happens. And I think that all of us feel that way in certain situations. And maybe that's in the first day on a job or the first week in something new and different, that you wonder, have I bitten off more than I can chew? Have I gone too far? Am I doing too much right now? And I have certainly felt that way. I felt that way in my very first bike camp when I made it onto a professional cycling team. showed up in California and we were going down a windy technical descent on a rainy day, and all of my teammates were ahead of me. And basically I was getting dropped. I was getting far behind them. And I remember having that exact thought that you're describing, which was, do I belong here? Like, can I do this? Am I good enough for this? Am I fast enough? Have I made a mistake? And I think that's really common, that feeling that you have when you take a big jump into something new, into that unknown.
What did you do when you found yourself feeling, do I belong here? What's the process that you've worked up to? I'm guessing it's second nature for a lot of things now. However, when we're doing something new, like you for the first time in this place or a first time in a job in a new place, that will come up and it will hit us in a way that we don't really remember ever being felt like, oh my gosh, where did all my confidence go all at once?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
So we practice and then we're in this new situation and it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, then what?
I think if you can gravitate to those things that you do well. If you jump in your freezing cold, deep water situation, you think, you know what, this is deeper than I thought and colder than I thought, but I know I can float. Like, you kind of gravitate to those things that you know that you can do well. I think that works in a job. I know when I first get there, I think, okay, I know how to get organized. Like, I know how to pull together a Google document of a really good list of what I'm going to tackle. And I can make another tab of all the questions I'm going to ask whenever I figure out who that person is. Bike racing, it was similar. It was, I know that I can climb, and I may not be the best descender or technical rider, but there are some things that I can do well. One is really think about those few things, because you might think I can't do all of this, but I know I can do those few things, and that is something to latch onto. And the other is finding that support network. There are going to be a handful of people that you really can trust, and you can trust to be a bit vulnerable. I think that's true in a job, and that's not everyone. That's probably not your boss on the first day to tell them, uh-oh, you've made a mistake in hiring me. That's, that might not be the best move, but to find that person that you can rely on. I know consistently throughout my career, I have found those people who are like, this is how it works here, and this is something that might be helpful to you. And I think kind of going into that network of support and finding those people who you can have that help you, that has been instrumental, I would say, both in my career in the corporate world as well as in bike racing. I found the girl on my team who was like, hey, listen, hang on to my wheel here, and you can do this up here, and kind of giving me those little tips that helped me get through kind of those feelings of awkwardness, uncertainty, and complete vulnerability.
When she took you under her wing, if you will, and said, hey, let me show you the ropes. Hey, I've got your back here. We're in this together.
Yeah.
Can you describe when you've done that for somebody, to be able to break down a piece at a time, the steps, if you will, so we can go, yeah, maybe we can be a mentor to somebody. Maybe we can be that person.
That's one of the best feelings, what you're describing, is because when you've gone through that situation of being that person who really needs help, and then as time passes, you become the person who is helping someone else, that is probably the most fulfilling emotion that you can have. And I remember being on a team in my final year of racing, and there was a young girl, she was just out of college, and she joined the team and was not exactly getting the same, I would say, almost respect as the others. She was sort of the one who was left out, selected last, never given the front seat in the car, like just little funny things like that. I remember sitting with her and just saying, hey, you are so strong. You are on this team for a reason. You are 22 years old and you have 2 decades of bike racing if you want to. You have a long future ahead and you're doing great. Like, you are a better sprinter than half of us here. So maybe they're faster climbers, but rely on that sprinting and know that when we get to that final place that you'll be there. Reminding her of those things that she has and those strengths that she has, and really kind of pointing them out to her again, because sometimes it's nice to hear them. Sometimes you forget what you do well. And when somebody externally reminds you, that feels great. And you think about that when you're in that zone of, I don't feel good. I don't feel like I belong here. You're like, actually, someone else is even saying that I do these things well. that external reminder of your strengths is one. And then just being there, giving that support when at some point they'll do something great, that person you're mentoring, and that's when you really acknowledge them publicly. If there are things that they can work on, you do those privately. You tell them, hey, listen, next time when we're in that situation, it'd be great if you did X. And then when they do that, they learn, then I think that's a really good opportunity to tell the other teammates. They see someone who it has kind of earned that respect and that trust, and then that filters down to the newbie in that situation. So that's great. I love that idea of kind of passing that around, the mentor.
Do you get to be mentored and mentor at the same time, typically in your experience?
In most situations, and you're not the oldest. And I know even in bike racing, it was a unique situation that I was older. So I came into the sport at a very late age. I was 34 when I did my first bike race, late 30s when I retired. Some of these girls had never been to college. They were in their early 20s, yet they had more bike racing experience. They started when they were 15, 16 doing races. So by the time they're in their early 20s, they've been racing for years. I've had a career under my belt, but not much bike racing experience. We're standing on a start line and I'm shivering and I'm nervous about making the first corner and doing what our director had told us the team needs to do and what I needed to do specifically. The roles are reversed at night. We finished a bike race and we're talking about life or careers or relationships. And I have a decade on these girls. I felt like that was such a nice balance to be the one who was learning from someone really young about bike racing and yet being the one to help guide with some interesting life tidbits based on my experience being the older person on the team. So absolutely, I think you can certainly be on both sides of that equation.
Whether or not people want it, they may not know they want it, right? And
Yeah.
being able to be open and broach those conversations. The other side of that is the learning. I have something to learn here.
Yeah.
I have something that I get to take away from in this situation. We're talking about mentoring and being mentored. We're talking about somebody taking us under our wing. We're talking about taking somebody else under our wing. This whole concept of inclusion. What does inclusion mean to you?
The sports background is really a good way to understand inclusion. I'd say this is true in all sports and certainly in corporate life as well. Teamwork was how we won a race. Every single one of us had a role and it was specific. My job was not to win the race ever. My job was to support the girl who's a good sprinter. And that meant going back to the team car and gathering water bottles and stuffing my pockets and then bringing them up to her. That meant protecting her from the wind. That meant doing a lot of things that were a pure support role to get somebody to win a race. And that, in my mind, is just such a good analogy for how teamwork works in life, in whatever job that you have, whatever career. The comparison is the business leader or the VP or whoever it may be in charge gets some of that recognition, but it's the whole team that is supporting that individual to get to that point. There's something to be said for that teamwork element, and that is knowing your role, but knowing that by me helping someone else, by me including someone else, that's best for the whole. That's the teamwork element. In terms of inclusion, I'm probably on an extreme that I have lived a life of the more the merrier in every single thing I did, to the point of like a date with my husband, the more the merrier. I'll invite my friends. So there's probably a limit to that. So I think there is something that you can learn from everybody. People feed off of one another's energy. The less cliquey we can be as women, as adults, as career workers, whatever that may be, the stronger we all are. That diverse setting that we're in allows us to learn and grow and teach. Having all of those elements is critical. And the more you can expand your web out to a broader group of people, it's beneficial for those people, but certainly for you as well.
There are a lot of times where people don't know their roles in an organization. They've been given this job description, yet there are all these unwritten agreements that what we actually do is different than the job description and the responsibilities that we were handed. And that makes knowing our role very hard. If we're told we're supposed to protect the sprinter in the example that you gave.
Yeah.
Yet we're also told in some unwritten way or unacknowledged way that we are the sprinter. How do you
Right.
do both? I mean,
How do you
those are two very different important roles that make a functioning team.
in the office environment? I think that's a very classic example of something that happens where you are the project manager, but you also need to drive this program, but you have customers that are calling in. And so you're pulled in a lot of those directions. It's easier said than done, but I think the more you can try to communicate with those that are around you, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what the end goal is. And to accomplish that, I've got to carve out time for this. What are those priorities and what can you get done? And to be clear in the communication of what you're doing. Knowing the big picture is essential in that. So what's the deadline and what's the deliverable? And when you're getting the calls from, if you're on the customer side and you're also on the production side, how do you manage all of that? Keeping that vision in mind, prioritizing and carving out what you can do that day is the most you can do. And I acknowledge that's a challenging situation, and it's a very real situation that happens in a lot of work settings.
There's this word that I'm totally intrigued about, this word solopreneur, right? This is an entrepreneur of one. And I'm always intrigued by that because, well, now we're wearing all the hats. We don't have a team. We've decided it's just going to be us. I know what my stance on that is, which is, no, it's not just us. I'm curious though for you, how do you respond to that? I'm a solopreneur and I'm really proud of it. Not to say it in a mean way, but that's exactly how it just came across. So I apologize if I've offended anybody. I'm curious. There's only so many hats that can be worn and stuff gets done.
I'm in that exact situation right now as a solopreneur. And I always think I need a staff of 20 because it hasn't happened yet. It's like, well, you actually need to make a living first, and then you can think about hiring that staff. You think of things working in a certain way. So you think, oh, social media has to happen this way. And here's how I need to do my marketing because that's what's done. And so I need to have this huge platform. And this is the way that it's done traditionally. As a solopreneur, if you can think through, well, actually, I do better with more individualized networking. And this is how I want to get clients. And you still focus on your strengths. That works in this setting too. I know that accounting is not my thing. My options are, if I can afford it, I hire one. If I can't, I find somebody who can help. And swap, can I trade? And I do this. If my skill set is something as random as bike racing or coaching, then I can do that in exchange for somebody who can help me pull together my bank statements. And so I think there's a lot of creativity that happens when you are a single standing person trying to run your own business. And I think it does require being resourceful, asking for help, and thinking through what you can offer somebody else. It's not always asking for favors. It's how can we make this work for both of us? Is there something I can do for you? It's not always following the tradition. You can go online and they will tell you, if you don't have 10,000 Twitter followers, you don't have a shot. And I find that's not, but it's not necessarily true. Yeah, exactly. Like some people are more personal. Some people find what they need in a more direct way or in a different way. And I think that if we can all know that that's okay, like that sense of what has to happen doesn't actually have to happen. Like what works for you, and think through, these are the things that I know I do well. I know these are the things where I can focus my time and my energy, and that's where it goes.
I'm all about bucking the system. I'm all about using the resources that are available. I'm all about the creative out of the box thinking. And I'll just tell you this, when I think of solopreneur, especially people who are like, I pride myself on that and I want to be that. We all have an internet provider. We all have a cell phone provider. Yes. We all have social networks we have decided to participate in. And in a way, those are our team. Sure, we're doing all of the decision-making, problem-solving, prioritization stuff as an individual.
Yeah.
We are enlisting the help of other people's creations to make what we are doing possible. So to think we're doing it all alone is very interesting to me because even in a race, whether it's a sprint or a long race, even if it's a project that's going to be iterating a piece of software to deliver to market, if it's creating a new product and doing product research, all
Oh
this stuff
yeah.
takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of conversation. And
Yeah.
so I love how you said, bring it together, do what you do best, figure that out, because that's where the connection is going to happen that can propel something forward.
There's always a saying, like, it takes a village. It's so timely. I'm doing a huge overnight race this weekend, and I was driving around my little town, like collecting all the things I need, and then having a coffee with someone who's done it before, and talking to a girl I was just with about nutrition and how you make that work. And just all of those people are part of this. So whatever happens in the end result, it was certainly not that I did the training and I helped piece together a lot, but that was one piece of this. Like, this is happening because of all of literally, I feel like this community has stepped up to help me do a race. That's how it works. There's that nice blend of reaching out to people, asking for help when you need it, relying on your community, but also giving back to your community when you can, when you're the one who's in that position to do so. And you're absolutely right. It's something as simple as a skiing race. I have a full village behind me making this happen. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that.
Around support, we've got these self-limiting beliefs. What was the biggest self-limiting belief that you faced when you decided you were going to go after this goal, this dream of professionally racing?
I would say I worried the most about my lack of experience. So I jumped into the sport late, and these girls had more time than I did. In the beginning, I didn't read races as well. So if you can think of somebody who grew up with soccer, basketball, any sort of team sport, they get the dynamic. They know what zone defense is. They know kind of when you would apply that and when you want man-to-man. You watch it, you understand it, and it becomes part of kind of your everyday thinking. And you can watch these plays of if it's a basketball game, and you know what they'll do next. Because I started bike racing late, I didn't understand the plays as well. I didn't understand what tactics to apply at what time. If you're not as intimately familiar with bike racing, it's when you attack, when you conserve, what gear you need to be in. If it matters if somebody else goes off the front, if it's a certain person, you don't care, but if it's somebody else, you do. And there's a lot of dynamic that happened. I was really concerned with my lack of understanding how the big picture game worked. Sometimes it was a problem. Sometimes in a bike race, I would go do something, and then a teammate would say, "What were you thinking?" or "Why did you do that?" Then you get that sort of negative reinforcement that you don't know what you already worry about not knowing. And that can spiral downhill to some extent. And then you finish a race and you have immediate feedback. Your director says, "What happened? Like, why'd you do that?" That was the biggest challenge I had. I would say that is what I would go into races thinking, like, how I don't know this sport as well as these girls. I don't get the strategy as well as those that have been in this longer. It's not intuitive to me like it is to them.
You are listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 136, Get Uncomfortable, with our guest, Amy Charity. You were just talking about the negative response in some cases that came back. What about overall support? Did you face a lack of support from the people closest to you, your mom, your dad, your siblings, your friends, your spouse?
I was lucky that my husband really supported bike racing. He had a background in cycling. He was one of the biggest supporters in terms of saying, "I understand this is a financial trade-off, a time trade-off for the two of us to spend any time together. You'll be gone for 3 years or however many years you decide to race." He understood that there were a lot of trade-offs, and he still was behind me. My colleagues were probably the first people to think, really, you're leaving this wonderful job, you're doing well, your career trajectory looks great, and you're going to leave that all behind in the pursuit of something like bike racing. There was a lot of doubt, and I definitely heard a lot of, "Why would you even consider doing that? It doesn't make sense financially. It doesn't make sense for your future." it's a hard life with no upside. What I heard from a handful of people, colleagues, and a handful of friends, my parents would have preferred that I continue down a more traditional career route. Bike racing is dangerous and it's certainly not lucrative. So I think those two things they just worried about in general if I was making an overall good decision for my future.
How did that impact you?
I think it does some good things. Like, I think that if you have people that you care about and trust, and they are offering a different perspective and ensuring that you think through the decisions you're making, I think that can be really helpful. And that is for me to think, I still have a vision of being a bike racer. I know there are trade-offs and I still want to go forward with it. To some extent, it really is a good thing to have those people not just saying, don't do this, but saying, have you considered X? I think they helped me consider X. Having done that, I knew how strongly I felt about the decision I was making. That taken too far, it can really be a challenge. When you surround yourself by people who are like, what are you doing? That's a bad idea. Then that's too much. That's going too far. But when you have those that are close to you, making sure that you are really committed to what you're doing, that's a good place to be. I was grateful to at least my parents and also to my colleagues for that, kind of make challenging my decisions.
I love the outlook that you've put on it in terms of okay, this is a challenge and how am I going to respond to this? And being able to reinforce, yeah, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. I'm still doing it.
This vision is still, I'm going to be a bike racer.
Boiling it down. I know I was telling you before we started recording about an event that I have coming up, and I made an audacious goal for what was uncomfortable for me to continue to grow out of my comfort zone, to get the number of people in the space that I wanted. The first 5 people I told, no lie, it was a variation of this. You really think that's doable? 5 people in a row. And I was like, I think I've found the right place, because other people don't think I can do this either.
Exactly.
Wow. Let's see what we can do to make this happen. Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to bring into my community?
Yeah.
Who is already supporting me and actually saying, yes, go, this is great.
Exactly.
I'll do whatever I can do to help you. People who have done an event of that size before. Now what? And asking them the same questions. So it's the same process that you said you went through getting ready for your race that's coming up this weekend.
Yep. That's the flip side, is I think that every door that opened for me was because of a relationship that I had established at some point along the way. And it was from putting that out there. So after kind of going through those challenges with people who think, really? Is that possible? Are you sure you can do that? Has that been done before? So after getting over those challenges, to put it out there to those people, and in such wonderful and surprising ways, those doors started to open of people that I met or saying, hey, I knew you were interested in this and I know somebody, or whatever it was. And that's when you start to get traction towards your goals. Then surrounding yourself by those people who are actually doing what you want to do is critical. Then you're part of it. Those people are making it happen. So why can't you? You're surrounded by them and you're all of a sudden you're just part of it. You're in that process.
And I'm not asking any of those people to do it for me. I am asking is for their advice, their stories, the obstacles, because if we just hear what they say and we expect them to carry us through it because they've done it before, now we have a different issue that we have to face. We're way too comfortable, if I were to say so myself. It's okay, so they're showing up, they're giving me this. How do I use it? What exactly does this mean in the context of what I need? What other questions are coming up because I don't feel like I have a complete answer yet?
And sometimes after those conversations, you come up with, oh, I didn't even think to ask about that. Yeah. That definitely happens in this situation. Somebody was describing something I was really fearing in this event that I'm doing. Oh, this technical, scary downhill with moguls and it's steep. And what if there's not much snow? And he was like, by that point, Amy, you probably don't have your toenails. You haven't slept in a day and a half. Like, the last thing you're worried about is a technical descent. Like, other things are bothering you more. I was like, wow, real. Okay.
Oh my gosh, that was a conversation I was having recently with somebody for myself. I was recognizing, talking about personal values and the way that they're showing up, that there's a lot of stuff I do that I don't need to be doing.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right.
And
Yeah, that's
having
exactly.
deadlines and forcing yourself to meet these things that you commit to and figuring out to get it done at all costs. I made this commitment. I'm going to do it. I'm really going to do it. Yes, this is what it's going to take for me to do this. It's amazing to watch. I'm like, but I thought I really needed that extra
Yeah.
thing that whatever it was, right?
You can sort of singly focus on one thing, and it's like, but if she doesn't call me back, how can any of this happen? And you're like, actually, I can do it without her calling me back. I can call someone different. I've been in that situation before where I'm just like, she hasn't called me back. I got to call her one more time. I'm going to text her now. And it's like, actually, let's think through this a different way. This can still happen.
What you're describing, and you and I are both working in different ways from this same mindset of there's always a way. There's always another solution.
Yeah.
There's always something else I can go seek out and find that's going to show up when I need it, provided I'm willing to see it. There are some people that are listening to this program that are not there. And the people that are listening to the program that are not there, back when you got that negative reinforcement about that thing you didn't think you know, so now you don't think you know it.
Yeah.
Before you had that mindset, can you think back? So for somebody who's on that side of it, what would your tips to them be to be able to continue to cultivate that mindset in the midst of what seems like really big obstacles and setbacks at every turn?
I like sort of how that story ended. So basically I go into this race and I'm feeling like, I don't know tactics. I don't understand who the players are. I don't know anything about these girls. And the director and my teammates are noticing. So couple things. One is, what can I do? And I was like, well, I can learn whatever I can in my given amount of time. And I did start to study like people and races. I started watching old bike racing. I started watching old sprints. I started like really reading about all the different cyclists who are out there and learning who they were and what their strengths were, like really digging into it. And I think that's a tangible step that people can take, which is, okay, so you have a gap in knowledge. No problem. Like that's not your fault. That's just where you are. You can change that now. Like you can't change it historically, but you can start making progress. So that was one. And the other was finding that, and it goes back to that support. I remember calling my husband and saying, listen, like I really struggled in this race. I did this dumb move and everyone came down hard on me and I can't believe I did that. And he knew the timing and he knew the state I was in. He was, you know what? You are stronger than 90% of those girls. Don't listen to what those girls are saying. That director of yours, like he just had my back. And he just knew that that's what I needed then. Sometimes he'll tell me the opposite, tell me to sort it out. But then it was, you are strong. You're such a good bike racer. That move actually wasn't a bad move. Like, here's why it made sense. So I think if you can take action for the things you can control and close those gaps of knowledge or skill, and then have some support at that point. You call your aunt, your best friend, your mom, whoever it is who will give you that unconditional support. There are times that it's really helpful. And he wasn't just saying that to make me feel better. He believed it. Like he unconditionally thought I did the right thing. Having that support and then also making those changes really helped me fundamentally change my own internal concern that I wasn't good enough in understanding how the tactics worked.
Some of those people that are listening that are type A personalities might be going, no, I do it all on my own. And no, all these obstacles are mine alone. Rewind this whole program. Wait, is that even a thing? Maybe use the scroller and go backwards.
Scroll back.
Whatever you're listening to, press that back 15 seconds and listen to what Amy was talking about earlier. This is a village, and here are how all these people are showing up to support us, to support me in this situation. That's the part that we all need. Type A personalities like to control because they know they can only control themselves. So what do? They control everything.
Yeah.
That they touch. And that also can prevent community. That can prevent connection. Being a super introvert or incredibly shy can also be an obstacle because every single one of us, we have a trait that will prevent us. It'll show up, prevent us from where we want to go, won't it?
Oh yeah.
Mine is asking for help.
Yeah.
Not because I don't think I actually don't even know. It might be because I'm afraid to show I need help. It's not that I actually need help or not. It's sometimes I ask for help for the sole purpose of making a connection, deepening a connection, knowing that I might get rejected anyway, but that I need to be okay with the fact that I'm showing somebody else that I can't do it all.
It's a position of vulnerability, like especially when you are competent, strong, you usually take care of everything. It is that position. And sometimes you can't help it. You're in that position. And sometimes you, like in your example, you can just sort of put yourself out there to reach out to people. I was lost once, and that's how I bumped into the director. I was in Europe. I just finished a time trial. My brain was half functioning. I was so exhausted. I was just like this disaster. And I was within 100, maybe not 100 yards, but I was very close to where I needed to be. And I remember I could not get my brain to work. And I went to another American that I saw and was like, I'm lost. I don't know where my team car is. And he was like, no worries. We can help you out here. He knew it's somewhere within almost eyesight, but he knew the state I was in. And that was just like pure vulnerability. And I remember when I was approaching him, I was thinking, in hindsight, this is going to be embarrassing, but I need help. I became friends with him after that. And maybe he did laugh at me afterwards, but he didn't when I was there. And he helped me get to where I needed to be. And later, I at least had something to laugh about. Like, I was that girl who needed help finding our car that was next to where you were standing. People in general, they do want to help you. And if you can allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable, worst case scenario, you have a good story later. And best case scenario, you get what you need and you establish some sort of relationship with somebody. It ends up it's kind of a win-win when you do ask for help, even if it doesn't go well.
That's a great story. Have you ever found a time where you've outgrown the support you had or the connections that you had, and you had to basically up-level your own game? How did you find that or realize that you were there, and what did you do about it?
At least in my life, it's harder to feel that way in a business setting because I always feel like there's such incredibly smart, dynamic people with so much experience around me. So I always felt like it was easy to find that next level of person. And I always felt that way in a business setting. In a bike racing setting, living in a mountain town, I certainly reached that plateau. And so I had to surround myself with people who were the absolute experts. And that meant a huge trade-off. The listeners can think through, this is significant. If you want to up your game and you're in this area of where everyone is similar to you and you want to surround yourself by people who are better than you to learn from them. In my situation, I packed up my car and drove to Tucson, and that's where Hollywood is to actors, Tucson is to cyclists. It's where you go to try to make it. I literally rented a room, again, in my late 30s, married, have a mortgage. So this is not normal behavior for someone of my age. Drove there, moved in, rented a room for the winter, and did what the other aspiring pro cyclists did. And so I was surrounded by people who were faster than me, better than me, understood racing more than I did. And I really, really put myself out there to join their rides. And there were days I couldn't ride with them. There were days I was not as good as them. There were some days I could kind of hang, but I learned a ton, and I certainly bettered myself as a cyclist and increased my understanding of how that world works. In a sort of less example of just literally planting yourself in a community that's what they do, I think you can do that in the business sense also. And that's reaching out to those mentors, spending time with the people who are doing the things that you aspire to do. Whatever your weakness is or whatever you want to work on, can you put yourself around those people?
How do you look back and go, yeah, I did a good job here. This is what I want to improve on next?
If you're type A or if you're a perfectionist, you always think maybe I could have done a little bit more. Many of us tend to be harder on ourselves than we could because we're comparing ourselves with what we know, what we're surrounded by. So I always think for a pro, I was pretty good, but I wasn't the best pro. So I still look back like, oh, she's so much better. But I think when I take a step back to the real world, just being a pro is pretty good. Setting your objective, you have your audacious goals. In my case, the Olympics, I was on the top 20 that maybe could have made it there. Racing in the world championships was sort of a step down. And then from there, doing well in nationals. So if you can kind of have these layers of what you'd like to accomplish. Well, I did not make it to the Olympics, but that's okay. I can certainly live with that. I did race in worlds, so that feels like a good accomplishment. It's knowing you did the best of what you're capable of. That, in my mind, it's something that I still work on, because I think, what if I started earlier, would I have done X? Or if I had mastered X skill, could I have done this? And I think that if you can get your head around, if you set a goal and you do the absolute best of your ability to strive in achieving that, in my mind, that's success. So I do look back at bike racing, and although I was not the best and I didn't go to the Olympics and I was pretty good on a very good team, that in my mind was certainly a success. That's something that we can all apply in a career of, okay, what did I do absolutely everything I was capable of doing? If so, in my mind, yes, that's success.
What's your next big goal, Amy?
I like to sort of combine a physical and a mental challenge. And I think they all are when you're out doing any sort of racing, like a big piece of it is the mind game. And so that's why I'm doing a race from Crested Butte to Aspen. And it's a 40-mile ski race overnight, starts at midnight, and a lot of climbing and a lot of sort of technical skiing. And I think that goal is just something, it's really different than what I've done athletically before. And just accomplishing it is really taking me out of my comfort zone. And I like to continue to push those limits for myself. So once, if I can achieve that, then I think I'll come up with another one that does the same. It gives me that mental and physical, that push that I'm looking for.
What makes it bold to get uncomfortable?
When it's something that you haven't done before. So you have to be willing to get uncomfortable. You have to be willing to step into a place that you've never been. It doesn't feel good. It's not like you step into this new area, you try something different, you're like, this is great. It's usually awkward, and it's usually it's not comfortable. And that's the whole point of it, is when you come out the other side, that's when you experience like true fulfillment, in my mind. Like that's a reason to do it. Like that's the reason to take that bold move. That's a reason to do something you've never done, do something you're not particularly strong at or good at, or learn in something new, is because that's like, if we can all agree that living your life is about fulfillment and discovering new things, when you get to the other side of having been there and uncomfortable, it's such a better feeling of fulfillment than you would have had having not tried.
All right. See what I mean? Talking with Amy, all about being uncomfortable. And notice the mindset that she brought to this conversation. And we talked about it a couple of different ways. Mindset matters more than we realize. And Amy is living proof of not only being able to use mindset to achieve goals, also being able to articulate elements of the mindset that she is using for us to be able to emulate, to use to achieve our goals. That's an amazing takeaway from this conversation. So save it. And after you save it, rate this program. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you took away. Tell us your experiences, because subscribing to this program and sharing through social media and through email will help us make sure we're tailoring the program to what you want to hear, as well as reaching the people who are interested in this topic, who are facing a problem similar to this, who are working on a mindset change to get the information that they need to achieve their goals. We can do that by talking about the Voice of Bold Business together through social media. Share your story and experience. Tell us what it means to be a leader today when you've been uncomfortable. Leading and having leadership includes a large part of mindset and attitude, as Amy Charity shared with us today. We want to know what's next for you and how are you going to get uncomfortable.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.